Even if you're experiencing pain while you breathe through the front of your chest or even the side of your chest, clinically I tend to find that the dysfunction that perpetuates that starts from the back. G'day, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is for anyone who experiences pain while breathing. Now that can be pain through the front of the chest, whether it be costochondritis or something like that, or just a general sense of pain around the sides of the rib cage or in the back or upper back, even lower back in some instances when you take a breath. Now obviously any pain while breathing can be a very disconcerting experience for a lot of people. This video is obviously for the people who are experiencing more mechanically driven pain, which in my experience is probably the majority of people, but unfortunately sometimes you have to go through that process of ruling out some of the nastier things to then look for something like this. But I want to show you an exercise today to really help you figure out exactly where that mechanical pain when breathing is coming from, and then hopefully allow you to control that and get rid of that so that you don't have to keep putting up with it. So what's important to touch on before we get to this assessment and treatment technique is we need to take time to understand the mechanisms behind breathing. And if we can understand the mechanics of breathing, then it's a lot easier to understand why you might be experiencing pain while breathing. We really need to understand the dynamics between the musculature, the rib cage, and the lungs. Now essentially it is all connected. So when your muscles activate to open up your rib cage when you breathe in, what that essentially does is that opening up creates a negative pressure inside your lungs, which draws air into your lungs for distribution around your body. The important thing about this is that we need the joints of your rib cage to open and close optimally in order to allow that to happen optimally as well. But if we take this a step further, if some of those rib joints, and in my experience, it's most commonly the rib joints at the back which tend to become stiff and dysfunctional the most, even if you're experiencing pain while you breathe through the front of your chest or even the side of your chest, clinically I tend to find that the dysfunction that perpetuates that starts from the back. And we can assess that in a number of different ways. Now the first way I think we can do this is by simply crossing our arms across our chest, being up nice and tall, and just twisting from one side and twisting to the other side. Now what you generally tend to find is that in a lot of cases, one side may either feel a little bit looser. So for me, I feel looser turning to the right side. One side will obviously then feel a little bit stiffer. So I don't have any pain here, but I do feel like twisting to my left-hand side, there's a little bit more restriction. But for some people, twisting to one side or the other may actually give you some discomfort or reproduce some of the pain in the areas that you feel when you breathe. Now, if you do, obviously, that's a dead giveaway that some of those thoracic joints or those rib cage joints aren't necessarily moving the way they should, and they're a little bit irritated or they're jamming up, and mechanically there's a bit of an issue there. Now, that's a very broad way to go about this. We can be a little bit more specific. A tennis ball or a lacrosse ball is an amazing way to get a really good systems check, a really good sort of objective assessment of how your rib cage is functioning, so you can pinpoint the exact area that might be causing your dysfunction and allow you to be more specific in terms of freeing that up. So once you've found a ball that feels soft enough and respectful enough to use, we're going to take that ball and place the ball in the area at about the level that you think is involved here. So we don't want to be right in the middle of the spine, we want to be just off to the side, and we can move up and down or left and right based on what you feel you need to do. And again, we just want to lie down on the ball, let it press into that spot, then just gently try and relax as much as you feel you can. Now, while this area is probably going to be quite tender for a lot of people, we actually want to make sure that we're taking note of how stiff and tight it is as well. Because if you feel like one side is generating your pain, but it doesn't feel stiff and tight, if you come across to the exact same spot on the other side, and this doesn't hurt but it feels really stiff, we need to make sure that you're taking the time to free up that stiffness to allow that irritated spot to function better. And it may be beneficial for some people because sometimes you don't have to be on the spot that's really tender and really irritated, but in a lot of cases there will be some muscular tightness or some muscular spasm over the top that would benefit from this. But again, make sure you're not missing the potentially hidden symptoms on the opposite side or above or below, having said that, just by focusing on the pain on its own. Then again, all we want you to do, once you've found where you need to be or one of the areas that you want to be on, Again, we're not rolling around here. We want to be very specific to allow the ball to gently press into that spine and that rib cage to make some specific change to that stiff area. Then all I want you to do here is you can relax, let the ball sink in. I'll also get you to take a deep breath into the ball. The reason being is if this rib cage or this rib joint is stiff, obviously we want to use a functional motion to free this up faster. And by getting the rib cage to breathe in and expand, we're going to hopefully help to shear free some of the stiffness and some of this tightness in a really, really respectful way. And again, once you've done that, sit back up again, take a deep breath in. And with any luck, you may not necessarily feel like your pain has disappeared completely, but hopefully you'll feel like it's a little bit less, or at the very least something has released, or it's a little bit looser than what it was before. So I think this is a really, really positive exercise that you can do. If you do your deep breathing, reassess how that feels, cross your arms, rotate again left to right. I automatically feel like the spot that I was on has released my rotation a little bit more than it was before, and then I don't have to guess, I know exactly what I've done. Now, the next thing I wanted to touch on just before we finish up on the video, and we want to have a really sort of strong conversation about why this has happened to you in the first place. Because unfortunately, a lot of people who experience pain when breathing don't necessarily have some heroic moments or some traumatic moment or an accident that caused it. There has to be a reason why that specific part of your body has ended up the way it has. And as I mentioned briefly at the start, the single most important thing that I would urge people to take a look at essentially tends to be your sitting habits or your stationary shapes. We may not necessarily be talking about sitting postures if you're someone who's on your feet all day, but myself as a physio, I tend to find that even if I'm sitting really well, it can be very easy to sort of bend over from a bad shape if I'm treating someone. So if you're someone who feels like you don't sit very much, please consider the standing and leaning shapes that you might be in. But also, when you finish up your day and maybe when you get into bed, for example, you're sitting up and reading a book or using your phone or using a laptop or an iPod or whatever it might be, just make sure that if this section of your back, for example, is the section that you know was causing your symptoms from the ball exercise, it's very likely that that's the section of your back that you might be hinging through day to day on the couch, at the computer, in the car, sitting up in bed, bending over, whatever it might be. For long enough and often enough, your body has decided that it needs to stiffen up that area to make sure that it can tolerate that position. And again, if you feel like one side is a little bit stiffer than the other, then it's very likely that you might find that as you start to hinge through that part of your upper back, you may also then be rotating in a certain direction, whether that be with a mouse, with an instrument, whether that be sort of sitting and the way that you drive, or if you like to sort of sit into the arm of the chair and watch TV, there has to be a reason why that part of your body has become the way it is. And in my experience, looking at your stationary shapes, whether they be sitting or standing, leaning over, is a really powerful place to start, because obviously if you're working really hard at freeing up that stiffness and tightness through your trunk, then it's going to be all for nothing unless you address the underlying cause of that stiffness and tightness. It's going to keep coming back. So please let me know in the comments down below, if you do have this pain, how did it happen? Was it something where you moved and twisted and bang, it started to hurt and all of a sudden you started to get pain from breathing? Did you have a traumatic accident, or is it something that you woke up with and you've been dealing with it ever since? So if you went on to find this video helpful, please consider leaving a like rating down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and if you enjoy this type of content. If you found this genuinely helpful and this information really helped you overcome that pain while breathing, please consider leaving a super thanks donation on the video. It's just a great way to help support the channel. Allows me to keep making these videos. But with that being said, I genuinely and sincerely hope that was helpful. I know this type of pain can be really frustrating and quite debilitating, but thankfully there can be a really basic mechanical fix if you can figure out where that pain's coming from and get that to release. But as I said, I hope that was helpful. Join me in the next video and I'll see you then.